10 years ago yesterday, on January 5th, back in 2015, the 10th episode of Star Wars Rebels Season 1 aired on DisneyXD. The episode is Path of the Jedi. So this episode continues off where the previous episode, Gathering Forces, left us. Well, not quite, because Gathering Forces did end the 1A arc of the season, the event sale, so it wasn't a cliffhanger per se, but this episode does deal with the fact that Ezra tapped into the dark side of the Force to defeat the Empire. The episode opens up with Ezra being late to Jedi practice. Apparently he was hanging out with Sabine. I think I know what's going on. So, if you remember, way back 10 years ago when Season 1 is airing, and also previous episode where Zeb and Ezra steal a TIE fighter, and we learn later on that a TIE fighter gets painted by Ezra and Sabine. That's part of what's going on in the start of this episode, but hidden behind the scenes. Now, is that spoiling upcoming episodes? Yes. But I am talking about these episodes with the 10-year hindsight going in. That the fact that I know where the story is going to go. And so it's neat to see where these seeds are being laid. Now, this is only just the season 1 laying, but I am going to talk about future episodes as well that this episode does lay the groundwork for. Kanan decides to do is take Ezra and the Phantom to a Jedi temple on the south, but of course it's going to be Ezra's choice on where to go, but he had a hunch because Losar being Ezra's home, there being a Jedi temple there, that the Force would guide Ezra to the Jedi temple. He was correct in that assumption, likely aided by the Force as well, so that worked out on him pretty well. He did admit he wasn't positive, he wasn't sure that Ezra was going to choose, in his vision, the Jedi Temple on the south, but he does. I really like that scene though, because it does show that he did his research ahead of time. He made a prediction on what his Padawan's vision was going to be, and aided by the Force, he made the correct call. So they arrive at the Jedi Temple, they look for the entrance, they find it, requires a Master and Padawan working together to open up the temple. Which, by the way, is very similar to how way in a later episode on Malco requires Chew to activate the Sith Temple Zero as well. Interesting parallel though, but as I remember correctly, this is more a cooperation, while with the Sith it's more like a begrudging working together because one's trying to backstab the other. Which fits into that episode actually, but we'll talk about that then, but some, like I mentioned earlier, some groundwork that could be interpreted as laying the seeds for future episodes beyond season 1. Definitely the stuff, like I mentioned earlier, that we're laying the groundwork for season 1, that I think is definitely intentional. The other stuff might just be a happy coincidence. But of course, they go to the temple. Kanan is going to meditate in the main room with the bodies of other Jedi Masters whose Padawans never left the temple. Makes me wonder if they're still wandering around because the Force can be weird like that. And Ezra goes through, and, well, first he doesn't really pick the wrong path, rather a vision of Kanan leads him down the wrong path. Grand Inquisitor confrontation of Ezra's fears laid bare to him. That's the point of that first part. Ezra witnessing and experiencing his fears firsthand. His master dying, the ghost crew not caring for him or using him, all that stuff. And he's finally able to defeat the vision of the Grand Inquisitor by admitting that, yes, he's afraid of being alone again, afraid of being, letting Kanan and the ghost crew down. That's what he's afraid of, but he's not necessarily afraid of confronting the Grand Inquisitor, afraid of death. He admits that that's something that doesn't really afraid him, and that's what allows him to defeat that vision. And then we hear the disembodied voice of Yoda to guide Ezra on the next stage in his experience in the temple, which leads him to basically more admitting why he wants to be a Jedi. Starts with because Kanan believes him, goes to he wants revenge on the Empire, wants them to make suffer, to finally admitting to Yoda, but more importantly to himself, that he wants to be a Jedi because what Kanan and the Ghost Crew have inspired in him. He saw, how they helped others and how that made others feel, and he wants to continue doing that. Not think of himself anymore. He doesn't want to be selfish anymore, which is a very Jedi attitude, and then a kyber crystal is given to him. Now, Ezra doesn't know that yet. Kanan reveals that to him when he returns. So again, really good episode, really good moment for Ezra. He confronts his fears, admits what they are, but what doesn't cause fear in him, what he's not afraid of. Then he goes on his second stage and admits why he wants to be a Jedi. He has to go through it all, but he does lie at what's the heart of it. His first answer is the selfish reason, the person that he wants to move beyond of himself. And eventually he does admit the real reason. Really good moment though, sets up who Ezra is and who he is at deep down, who he wants to be. Fits very well in that regard. And doing all this, Kanan has his own, not necessarily vision, but conversation with Master Yoda, which gives him some comfort. Once he gets over the shock of hearing Yoda's voice, he's surprised and all that. But essentially, he admits that his fear that he won't be a good enough master for Ezra, and that's part of his own fear. And Yoda gives him just some comforting guidance. Not too much, just enough to ease his own fears. And that's pretty much where the episode ends. Or is it? Because like I said, they come back together. Ezra shares his kyber crystal with Kanan, and Kanan tells Ezra that that's a kyber crystal. He can build his own lightsaber. And then cuts to, they leave the temple and all that. Temple goes back underground on assault, partially hiding itself from prying eyes and those who probably would seek to do it wrong. I said that way for a reason. I'll get to that in a moment. And then goes to the ghost where Ezra builds his lightsaber. Kanan gives him some spare parts he acquired. He got a power converter for Chopper. Chopper doing something selfless for once. Good on Chopper. The master murdering droid does have a heart in there somewhere. Zeb, I think, gave him some components. Sabine gave him some components, and the same thing with Ezra. Same thing with Hera. They all gave him some pieces here and there. Apparently, though, he went to Hera for, some very specific components. We don't find out what those are yet, but it's clear that Ezra's lightsaber is unique. It's not the traditional looking lightsaber. And then we get to see his blade. He's got a blue lightsaber. I should address what's special about his lightsaber because it does fit who Ezra is. His uniqueness, those special components, is a reflection of how Ezra is not a traditional Jedi. This is more of a term after Rebels, but a Boken Jedi, a Jedi trained outside the mantles of the Order, outside the temple. And having a non-traditional lightsaber is a good reflection of that in Ezra, especially because Ezra's the first Boken Jedi we see in the canon. We saw many in Legends, but that wasn't the Legends term. That's a distinct canon idea. And the fact that the first Boken Jedi we see, his lightsaber is also different, is, I think, special. It's unique. Now, this is probably going to spoil a future episode, but I just want to address what's special about Ezra's lightsaber is that it also contains a stun blaster as a part of it, which is actually really important when you think about it. They're fighting the Empire. They can't always reveal that they got a Jedi with them. Having the ability that he can carry one weapon that can be both a lightsaber but also a blaster is a really good idea. Very tactical, if you will. Very practical in a galaxy where the Jedi are in hiding. Now, I did say it was a stun blast. I think it does have regular blaster bolts, but we gotta wait to see that later. Now, that addresses a lot of that stuff, but I had mentioned earlier that this episode sets up stuff for later in the season. Yes, but also later in the show. I already mentioned in connection with Malco with requiring Chewie to open/operate the temple, but there's other things as well. If you would take a note, in a later episode, Ezra, Kanan, and, spoilers, Ahsoka go to the Jedi Temple on Nassau and meditate, and they all have their own conversation with Master Yoda. This is actually, I believe, when Ezra realizes or learns that he was speaking with Master Yoda, because he didn't know who he was speaking with in this episode. This also brings up, too, Ezra received his Kyber Crystal in the World Between Worlds, which I think is very interesting. That shows that they were setting this idea up way back in season 1. Other people I know have pointed this out, but the fact that this setup dates way back to this episode is neat. Now, it's not as complete as we would see it later on when the Empire is doing the excavation, but it is very interesting. In fact, one thing, because I know about the War Between Worlds and the connection to the Jedi Temple and Assault, I was paying extra attention to the background detail to see if I could spot like the mirror or the wands or some other indication of the world between worlds outside of the scene where Ezra gets his crystal, where we have the lines like War Between Worlds, and then as he gets his crystal, the War Between Worlds itself manifests. But I didn't see any other connection beyond that scene with Ezra's Kyber crystal. But that was something I was keeping my eye out for because I knew it was a possibility. And some other setups? Perhaps, but those are the main setups. And well, yes, not all the setups I was expecting to see in this episode were manifested. That is part of the experience of doing this rewatch on the 10th anniversary. I know things about Rebels, but there's also things I've forgotten. So, taking what I know, I'm trying to pay more attention to see what things I've forgotten and what details I may have missed the first time, or what details that we all missed on the first time because we didn't know it was setting up something later. That's what I'm really loving about doing these 10th anniversary reviews. But that's where I'm going to end this review because the discussion continues in the comment section. Let me know what did you think of Path of the Jedi, and I'll see you January 20th for the next episode, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like and share. Also, consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on all my latest content. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the Force be with you always.